You just were on a panel in front of investors insisting Las Vegas is not dead. Why isn't it?
It is
despite
not.
The headlines?
Despite the headlines, I promise you it is not dead.
Except it is dead, and it will remain dead if people like you keep spreading blatant lies like this. MGM's CEO just went on camera to tell investors that Las Vegas is doing great. But when you actually listen to what he says, it's full of half-truths, spin, and corporate gaslighting. He literally says, Las Vegas is not dead. Not dead, really. Let's fact-check that. This is Bill Hornbuckle, the CEO of MGM Resorts International. He sat down at the Bank of America Gaming and Lodging Conference to convince Wall Street that Vegas is perfectly fine. But the numbers, the prices, and the reality on the Strip tell a very different story. So today, we're breaking down this entire interview line by line to expose what's misleading, what's exaggerated, and what's just flat out wrong. If you're new here, welcome to Las Vegas Confessions. I cover the stories Vegas doesn't want you to hear, from insider employee confessions to corporate spin like this. And in this video, we're diving deep into MGM's version of reality versus what's actually happening on the ground. Hornbuckle's trying to calm investors after one of Vegas's worst summers in years, and he starts by bragging about 98% occupancy. Sounds impressive, right? But here's the problem with that number. False claim number 1. Las Vegas is not dead. We ran 98% occupancy.
We ran 98+% in 9 properties across the board.
Bill Hornbuckle proudly says that MGM ran 98% occupancy across 9 properties. It sounds like proof that everything's fine, but it's actually one of the oldest PR tricks in the book. Occupancy can look great on paper, even when a city's struggling. All it takes is one busy weekend, a big fight, a concert, or a convention, and the numbers instantly spike. That doesn't mean Vegas is healthy. It means MGM found a way to fill rooms temporarily, not sustainably. And here's what they don't tell you. Occupancy doesn't equal profitability. A resort can be 98% full, but still make less money per guest if they had to discount heavily, comp rooms, or rely on event packages that bring little to no gambling revenue. They're counting bodies, not profits. Because if you've been on the Strip lately, you've seen what's really going on. Half-empty midweeks, quiet casino floors, and bars closing earlier than ever. So when the CEO cherry-picks one weekend and calls that proof Vegas isn't dead, it's just corporate misdirection. The real story is that Vegas can fill up for an event, but can't stay full. They're surviving on hype weekends, while the regular crowd, the everyday gamblers, the middle-class tourists have stopped coming as often. So no, Bill, Vegas isn't dead, but it's definitely running on life support. False claim number 2. Visitation was only down 11–12%.
Look, Las Vegas has had a tough summer. I think visitation was down 11 and 12% June and July.
Hornbuckle says visitation was down just 11 or 12% in June and July, as if that's no big deal. But in Las Vegas terms, that's massive. A double-digit drop in visitors means hundreds of thousands fewer people walking the Strip, fewer gamblers at the tables, and fewer tips for workers. This isn't a small dip. It's a collapse in momentum for a city that depends on constant traffic. When Vegas loses even a few percentage points of visitors, it ripples through everything, from dealers and bartenders to taxi drivers and show performers. 11 to 12% down isn't something you brush off. That's empty restaurants, quiet lobbies, and laid-off staff. But Hornbuckle downplays it, framing it as a temporary summer slump instead of what it really is, a warning sign that the average traveler is cutting back. People are staying home, not because they don't love Vegas, but because they can't justify the cost anymore. And when he tries to distract investors by pointing to upcoming events, concerts, boxing matches, the Raiders schedule, that's not a recovery plan. That's a Band-Aid. It's event tourism trying to plug the hole left by everyday visitors who used to fill those midweek slots. So calling an 11 to 12% decline just a slowdown is like saying your casino's only half empty, but the lights are still on, so everything's fine. The truth is simple. Vegas has priced out its regulars, and now it's feeling the consequences.
False claim number 3. Vegas still has value.
You can play a $5 table, you can have a $5 beer, you can go to a restaurant and dine a 3-course meal for under $33 a person. There is value there, and there's always been value.
This might be the most insulting claim of all. Hornbuckle tries to convince investors that Vegas is still a value destination. He says you can check into Excalibur or New York, New York for $85 a night, play a $5 table, grab a $5 beer, and eat a 3-course meal for under $33. Sounds nice, right? It's the kind of line that makes investors nod and smile. But it's a fantasy version of Vegas that barely exists anymore. Let's start with the example he chose, Excalibur. Of all MGM's properties, Excalibur is the bottom of the ladder, one of the cheapest hotels on the Strip. It's old, it's worn down, and it's mainly used to justify statements like this. When Hornbuckle points to Excalibur, he's not describing the typical Vegas experience. He's using the absolute cheapest outlier to pretend the whole city is still affordable. Even then, those price points are misleading. Sure, you might find a room advertised at $45 or $85 a night, but that's before the resort fee. Add taxes, a $40-something resort fee, and parking charges, and your affordable stay has doubled in price. Hornbuckle cherry-picks the cheapest scenario to create a talking point while ignoring the rest of the experience that's been relentlessly marked up. The idea that you can have a full Vegas experience, hotel, meals, drinks, gambling, and shows at a value price is pure marketing fiction. Because the things that made Vegas affordable weren't just the room rates. It was the overall balance: cheap buffets, free parking, low table minimums, and complimentary drinks that actually felt complimentary. Those things are gone. Now you're hit with fees at every turn. Parking fees, resort fees, convenience fees, service fees, and even venue fees that no one can explain. You can't even order a beer at the pool without it costing $15 plus tip. And on the casino floor, that $5 table Hornbuckle mentions is more like a $25 minimum at most MGM properties on weekends. Even the so-called low roller tables disappear during peak hours, replaced with higher limits and worse odds. This isn't value, it's selective framing. Hornbuckle's version of affordable Vegas applies to a sliver of time and a handful of rooms, but he sells it like a universal truth. It's the same strategy that corporate Vegas has been using for years. Talk about affordability in theory while systematically pricing out the very people who built the city's reputation. The truth is, Vegas doesn't feel like a bargain anymore. It feels like a money trap dressed in neon. And when the CEO of MGM says there's still value here, he's really saying, please don't notice how expensive we've made everything else. But finding value in Vegas now is like finding water in the desert. It exists, but it's harder and harder to come by every year.
False claim number 4. record revenues mean the company is healthy. Of course, a company can report record revenues and make it look like everything is thriving. But revenue alone is not a measure of health, especially in the hospitality and casino business. In many cases, revenue growth comes from raising fees and extracting more money from a shrinking base of loyal customers. When you dig deeper, the picture isn't as rosy as Hornbuckle's soundbites suggest. Take the visitor numbers, for example. Even as MGM reports record revenue, fewer people are walking through the doors. They're making more money from fewer guests. That might look good on a quarterly earnings chart, but it's a warning sign for the long-term sustainability of the brand. When fewer people visit, word of mouth and repeat business begin to erode. Loyal customers notice the nickel and diming, and they start staying away or choosing alternatives. In other words, short-term revenue gains often come at the cost of long-term loyalty. Where the revenue actually comes from matters too. A lot of it isn't organic growth from more visitors, it's from add-on charges. Higher room rates, resort fees, minimum table bets, parking charges, and digital or iGaming revenue all add up. On the surface, these numbers swell the top line, but they do so by squeezing the very people who used to support the ecosystem. Every new fee might increase the revenue per guest, but it reduces the number of guests willing to return, and it erodes the goodwill that makes Vegas a destination. Labor and service are affected as well. When customers feel nickel and dimed at every turn, complaints rise, tips fall, and employee morale suffers. Service quality declines, and that only drives more people away. It's a feedback loop. Extract more per guest, diminish the experience, lose repeat business, and then try to offset it by raising fees again. The company may report record revenue each quarter, but that doesn't reflect the experience on the casino floor, the quality of hotel stays, or the satisfaction of the average visitor. At the end of the day, there's a simple question every visitor should ask. Would you rather have 3 million repeat visitors paying modestly, or 2 million visitors paying way more but never coming back? Hornbuckle's focus on record revenue clearly favors shareholders, but for the everyday people who make Vegas what it is, this approach is damaging. Record revenue alone cannot disguise a business that is slowly undermining the very foundations of its success. False claim number 5. Blame international travel, especially Canada.
We need to be welcoming, starting with Las Vegas. Make sure Canada knows. Today, we have a contingent up in Las Vegas led by our LVCVA president saying that Canada, we love you, we want you, we need you, and that is true. Please come back, please come. We're down 40% in Canada, right? But in Las Vegas terms, it's 3% of our mix. So it's not like the end of the world, but it's important business to us.
Hornbuckle points to international travel, specifically a 40% drop from Canada, as a reason for soft numbers. On the surface, that sounds significant, but he immediately admits that Canada accounts for only 3% of the total mix. In other words, he's taking a tiny slice of the business and using it as a scapegoat, while the larger, more systemic domestic problems go unmentioned. It's a classic corporate move. Highlight a convenient external factor and hope the audience doesn't notice the bigger picture. Companies love to blame forces outside their control. Visa issues, border frictions, marketing budgets, or even geopolitical shifts are easy targets. They make for a neat story. See, it's not us, it's them. But the very data Hornbuckle presents undercuts his own argument. If Canada is just 3% of revenue, A 40% decline there barely moves the needle. Using that as an explanation while ignoring the majority of domestic revenue is disingenuous at best. The real problem is structural. Domestic demand is soft, particularly among middle-class and regional travelers. These customers are extremely price-sensitive. Rising fees, higher minimum bets, and increased resort charges are pricing many people out of Vegas. Unlike the international visitor whose trip is a splurge, domestic guests have alternatives closer to home. This isn't a temporary hiccup caused by global travel. It's a long-term shift that reflects affordability and accessibility. This dynamic has real consequences beyond MGM's balance sheet. Rural and secondary tourist towns that depend on visitors feel the effects directly. When domestic travelers pull back, local hotels, restaurants, and attractions lose revenue, sometimes catastrophically. Hornbuckle's own argument about diversification, Macau, digital gaming, regional expansion, is precisely why small businesses struggle. Corporate chains can weather declines in one market by reallocating resources elsewhere. Local economies can't. They are left fully exposed to the ebb and flow of visitor demand. The takeaway is clear. International declines, while visible, do not explain the real problem. Domestic malaise drives the majority of the downturn. Hornbuckle knows this, yet as CEO, his priority is to reassure investors. That often means bending the narrative, framing tiny external issues as major causes, and leaving the underlying structural concerns unspoken. For everyday visitors and local businesses, the story is obvious. The challenges are homegrown, not foreign. False claim number 6. It's the government's fault.
I think going forward, we need to go back to Congress and talk about appropriations and how to go from 100 million to 20 million is, in the long run, not sustainable. To think that the United States of America wouldn't invest over more than 20 million in travel and visitation on something that had a $50 billion surplus, we got to get there, and we will continue to push to get there.
Hornbuckle introduces government policy as a factor. Visa surcharges, budget cuts to U.S. travel marketing, and even FAA funding. These are real levers that influence tourism. But the way he frames it simplifies cause and effect to the point of misdirection. By highlighting policy shifts, he shifts attention away from corporate choices that have a far more immediate impact on visitors. Take visa fees, for example. Adding $250 to a visa charge is certainly a policy decision that can affect international travelers. But was it the tipping point behind declining numbers? Unlikely. Domestic affordability issues, rising resort fees, higher room rates, minimum bets, and other add-ons had already started pricing middle-class visitors out long before these policy changes were implemented. The problem isn't just international access, it's that the product itself has become less accessible to the majority of guests. Then there's the matter of FAA funding and reductions in national marketing budgets. Yes, infrastructure and promotion can influence tourism patterns, but the key question is, who benefits from this policy-focused narrative? When corporate America lobbies for more federal marketing dollars instead of addressing pricing, service, and overall experience for everyday visitors, that's a misaligned strategy. Marketing dollars might bring more attention to Vegas, but if the average traveler can't afford to visit, all that advertising is wasted. Ultimately, the framing matters. Hornbuckle presents policy issues as external causes to justify soft numbers, but corporate decisions drive the visitor experience more than government levers ever will. Raising fees, increasing minimum bets, cutting value packages, these are choices made inside the boardroom. If a CEO wants to stabilize attendance and loyalty, the most effective moves are to make the product attractive and accessible to middle-income families, not to rely on government spending to prop up demand. Visitors notice the difference. When a destination becomes expensive and less welcoming, it doesn't matter how many headlines or policy adjustments exist, people stay home. Policy can create a small ripple, but corporate behavior creates the wave. Hornbuckle knows this, yet the narrative he chooses to tell emphasizes government shortcomings over the decisions his own company has made. Policy matters, yes, but corporate choices matter far more.
Bottom line, Bill Hornbuckle's interview is a PR tour disguised as reassurance. He uses clever metrics, one-off weekends, outlier examples, and policy scapegoats to create a narrative that everything is under control. The truth is much less comforting. MGM and other major casinos are extracting more money from fewer visitors. That strategy may boost quarterly earnings and make headlines look impressive, but it erodes Las Vegas's long-term appeal. It damages the city's reputation as a destination and hurts the livelihoods of the employees who actually keep the Strip alive. If you found this breakdown helpful, hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Have you noticed Vegas getting more expensive? Also, if there's interest, I'll follow up with interviews from workers and tourists who are living through these changes firsthand. Until next time, don't just take the headline metric at face value. Follow the money.